Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Tokenicer and I'm here to bring you guys in-depth news, analysis, and insights from the digital asset space, along with covering the progressive tokenization of the world. So I'm bringing you guys once again another Terramoon exclusive from my weekly show on there, Tea Time with Token. This week we sat down and had an interview with Greg Lunt on all things quant. Greg's been one of the most prominent quant researchers over these past 9 months, and I've had a great time previously collaborating with him on our ODAP discussion back in the summer, along with recently being invited as a guest onto his podcast on Patreon, which will be right down in the description below for anyone who wants to join. So of course we had to bring him on Tea Time. And as always, if you guys do enjoy what you heard from this interview, along with the previous shows that are on my YouTube, be sure to join Terramoon Ventures for more weekly shows just like this and everything else we bring to the table with my discount code Tokenice for 25% off. That's Tokenice, and as always, they'll be linked right down in the description below. And as usual, before we start, I just got to remind everyone that nothing you hear from either me or my guests is any form of financial or investment advice. But now that we got that out of the way, let's get right into it. Alright, welcome back to another episode of Tea Time with Token this week. So I hope everyone's been having a pretty good start to their week so far. In today's episode, we've got another special guest on with us today. We've got a very prominent quant researcher, and we're going to be talking pretty much all things quant, discussing the fundamentals and basically what it is and what the technology provides. And then at the end, I'll also be hosting a little giveaway for one quant with a trivia question. So be sure to stick around for that. But with that said, I'd like to welcome Greg. How are you doing, man?
How's it going? Everybody? Not a Discord veteran by any stretch, but I think I'm locked and loaded, so I'm ready to talk some quant, and I appreciate you having me on. It's been fun kind of jumping up and back between your YouTube channel and then my podcast, and now here we are. So, just love what you're doing, bro.
For sure, and right back at you. Yeah, I love the kind of collaborations we've been doing over the past couple months, and you know, getting you on Tea Time was something I've been looking forward to doing for a while now. So I think a good place to just start off is just, do you want to just tell everyone about yourself, kind of how you got into crypto, and then what it was about quant that really caught your eye and I guess has had you on this rabbit hole ever since?
Yeah, for sure. So, my name's Greg. I'm originally from New York. I currently live in Phoenix, Arizona. I am 30. How old am I? 35 years old. And I got into crypto in 2017. I randomly kind of stumbled upon it. My friend was looking at a chart, and I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "Bitcoin." I was like, "Oh shit, I've heard of that." And I kind of went down this rabbit hole. I was in this place in my life where I was looking to make money online. It's kind of my number one goal. And I was kind of a risk taker. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. I didn't own a car. I didn't own an apartment. I just had like a lot of flexibility. I was starting my own business, small little thing. And so I was like, all right, fuck it. I'm just going to kind of go all in this. I didn't really understand what investing was. I had a couple of I invested back in Google in 2009 and Facebook and stuff, but that was basically it. So this was kind of like a whole new thing. Frankly, I cashed out my 401k. I'd been working in normal jobs for about 8 or 9 years at the time, and pretty much went all in crypto and thought I was a genius for a few months as we skyrocketed. And then I was lucky enough to get a bunch of profits out. But I also had a lot of it that kind of sank back down, in the bear market. And so I took the bear market to kind of just triple down on learning. And, I'd been exposed to Bitcoin and Ethereum and Ripple were kind of like some of the ones that I had a lot of money in. But I cashed out of Ripple in 2018, and I had a bunch of other altcoins that just kind of bled out, right? And I got a full-time job after that because that's what you do. And then I made my way like I said, down the rabbit hole even deeper in crypto. And I was like, look, I believe in this. I started to learn what a market cycle was from having experienced it live. And then I found myself in mid 2020. I bought a little when everything crashed in March. And then over the summer, COVID happened. And by the end of the year, things were starting to, start to move back up. The halvening had happened. And yeah, there was a lot of good things happening at the end of 2020. And, I found Quant in October of 2020. There was something different about it. It checked a lot of boxes. So yeah, 2020 came around. I found Quant, and what was different about it was that it wasn't like a lot of these other tokens that are tied to DeFi was just had just happened, and there were a lot of tokens that were just like taking a shot. That nothing was really in place fundamentally in the world to kind of be ready for this kind of movement. It was a lot of just experimentation and big use cases and big promises, and is really exciting, but there wasn't really anything that was concrete. And I didn't even realize it when I was first investing in all the altcoins. It was just like, oh, this is like, going to fix this problem, and this is going to fix this problem. And I just didn't, until I found Quant, I didn't realize that there wasn't really a lot backing these things in terms of, true opportunity and true adoption. And they were just such low probabilities of hitting. Despite how high up they were in market cap. So when I discovered this project, I started to go deeper and deeper and check all the boxes. And it's like, okay, tokenomics are pretty solid with the cap supply. You have Gilbert Verdian and the team that have an incredible track record in their career. You have this adoption that's happening in terms of connecting with SIA, this massive European banking network, and you have partnership with Oracle, that certifying. Well, I guess they weren't certified at the time, but they were working very closely with Oracle. You had just a lot of things going from a partnership perspective. Working closely with the Bank of England and just all these things, and you start to open your mind a little bit, and you're like, okay, this use case. This interoperability use case, I've seen this before, but these guys are doing it different. Like, they're not just building a blockchain that's connecting other blockchains. They're building an operating system, essentially, right? They're building this overlay service that it doesn't store data like a blockchain does. It just provides the connections between the chains via an API. And it allows assets to flow in an atomic manner where they actually, can get removed off one chain and get placed on another chain. And it also, more importantly, connects to legacy systems so that you're not just connecting, the 1% or 0.5% of the world's money that's in crypto and having fun in your own little sandbox. You're actually bringing in, the visas, the banks, the things that aren't even in financial services. You're allowing data to flow. Anything that can become tokenized will be able to flow over whatever the winning interoperability protocol is. And there will likely, the way that I see it, and we'll probably get a little more into this. I know this is I'm going a little long here with this story, but basically Quant checked all the boxes for me. And I continued to kind of go down the rabbit hole of like trying to find red flags about the project. And I struggled for a long time. I think now that I'm in it a lot longer, I'm finding some, not ones that are, changing my investment thesis, but I'm just being a little more honest with myself about, what opportunities are there and what, there's always going to be trade-offs. So we could talk more about those as well, because I don't think they get talked about enough. It's just a lot, it's always, rose-colored glasses, but there's also a lot of reason for that. There's just a lot of sound fundamentals in this project, more so than I'd ever come across. And so as I navigated the bull market in 2020 and 2021, I basically used Quant as my store of value. And that worked out well because we kind of had Bitcoin make a move in October, November, December. And then when the turn of the year came, I had moved all of those profits into like DeFi tokens. And then DeFi went crazy in the turn of the year. And for whatever reason, Quant was just sitting at $40 for like 3 months, February, March, April. There was a joke that it was like a $40 stable coin. And I was like, yo, this project's crazy. And we have like all these Binance Smart Chain coins going crazy, like going 10x overnight, literally. Like someone would list something and it would just go nuts. And I was like, and Quant's just not moving. Like, this is absurd. So I just kept stacking and stacking. And then that went nuts over the summer. And so that, it was just a really good bull run. And that's when I started creating content. This is actually, now that I look at the calendar, is this week, last year. So it's been exactly 1 year that I started creating content around Quant. Wow. I started on Clubhouse. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Clubhouse. If you've been on Twitter Spaces, where it's kind of like live audio, similar to this, I suppose. Twitter Spaces is a clone of Clubhouse. Clubhouse came out first. And so I started doing like crypto stuff there, doing like, I was part of these groups doing educational stuff for 6 months or so. And then in September of last year, I was like, you know what? I need to tell people about this project in an organized way. There's so much information that I need to do like a full-on presentation. And I put together this massive thing with pictures and videos and audio clips and then, me doing the voiceover. And I did that for a few months in a row and started to build up a bit of notoriety. And then in January of this year, I was asked to do a Twitter Spaces with a few people from the Quant community, as well as a traditional investor who had an audience of his own on Twitter. And we kind of did a couple of those. And I was like, you know what, I should start taking Twitter seriously and start to repurpose some of my audio content and making like some dynamic tweets. And that set me apart a little bit in Quant Twitter and in crypto Twitter. And then, things kind of snowballed and here we are. So there's my like way too long introduction. And there
awesome.
You go.
I love it, man. Very detailed. And you know what? I really like hearing the story about how basically you went into the world of content creation, because you found this project and you kind of thought like, okay, this is insane. Like, there's nothing else in the ecosystem of crypto that's building towards the scale that this team is doing. And so you kind of felt like you wanted to bring that to a larger audience. And I guess that started with Clubhouse. And I mean, here we are now. You're at, I mean, last time I checked, you were at over 8,000 on Twitter. So I just kind of want to see and hear about how it is being a content creator nowadays, and kind of what life is like in that regard. Yeah,
so I've been in marketing my whole life, or my whole professional life, and I've done a lot of things, email and landing pages and selling on Amazon, fulfilled by Amazon FBA, and just doing a lot of different things, social media, of course, as well. So I've always had an eye for kind of trying to understand what makes people click and buy, and what they're interested in terms of consuming content. And when I got into crypto, I realized I was ahead of the curve. And then when I found Quant, I was like, okay, it's time for me to really start speaking. Like, I don't want to just be someone that is recycling information, or even just like necessarily giving too much opinion or trying to be motivational or anything like that, or like giving financial advice. I'm not a technical analysis expert, but I finally felt when I started researching this project super heavy that I had something to offer. And so I was like, people need to know about this, and I know more about this than a lot of people. And I don't consider myself an expert really in anything, because I just think there's always people that know more, and there's always so much to learn. So, but I do think that I had more information about this, and it was worth sharing. And I had gotten a bunch of family members in and friends, and I was like, I just need to like broadcast this. And Twitter, in my mind, from a marketing perspective, had always been a little bit more difficult to grow. Like, I thought there was more viral opportunities on other platforms. But what's interesting about Twitter is that the more you niche down, the engagement opportunities for virality, or not even virality, but just just high engagement is there if you get really niche. So like, there's baseball Twitter, and there's comedy Twitter, and there's crypto Twitter. And then within crypto Twitter, like this community is a great example of it. There's like utility crypto Twitter, right? I mean, you can go deeper and deeper down that. And the more value you can bring to a specific niche, the faster you can grow. And so I did experience some form of viral growth, not to the extent of like, millions of followers, but as of, I'm doing about between 1 and 2 million impressions a month. And it's depending on how much I tweet. It's slowed down a little bit lately because of my tweets, I was actually offered a full-time job in crypto content for a major exchange. So the last couple of months I've been working there. So my Twitter output has slowed down a little bit. I've basically been tweeting every single day since February until I guess mid or late July. Every single day. That was something that was really important to me, was put out a tweet, make it a valuable tweet. And I was also using a lot of media. So I include like audio clips, video, and I make sure that I'm kind of sourcing my own content and chopping it up and making it engaging so that it can really stand apart from a lot of the other tweets that are out there that are just text-based. And then the other hack, which I think anyone can do, even if you're not doing as much of the editing of like photos and videos and audio, is threads. Threads were really a huge hack for me as a content creator in terms of boosting impressions, boosting value. People are down to keep reading if you're actually telling them something that they don't know and they want to know. And it like goes back to the niche thing, right? So if you can get into a niche that people really value what you're saying and what you're talking about, then you can provide longer form content on Twitter via the threads. So threads meaning just kind of back to back tweets that are telling a story. And within that, there's also a lot of nuance that you can go into. Like I said, with the media, like attaching things to each tweet, you can embed other tweets that you've done before that other people have done and kind of, give them more value there. And you also, I use a lot of like emojis, and, the character count is a restriction, but it can also be a huge benefit to like being able to get across an idea. I've actually never talked about this before, but I used to, if you guys remember Vine back in the day, it was like the first app to ever have short form looping video before Instagram stole that. And so there were these 6-second videos, and I had built up a following on Vine of like 25,000 followers just doing like little comedy videos. And there's a real beauty in like trying to put complex ideas, in that case comedy, in this case crypto or educational material, into a very short and condensed medium, right? So then it was 6-second video, and now it's like a 280 character tweet. And so within a thread, of course, you can have many more characters, but each tweet should be able to stand alone. So I don't know if you guys ever, if you know Naval, Naval on Twitter. He's an angel investor and he's excellent at Twitter. And one of the things that he always said, or that I heard him say, was don't, like, if you're doing threads, don't number your tweets. Like a lot of people, they do like 1 out of N or 1 out of 20, right? And then they keep going down 2 of 20, 3 of 20. Don't do that, because you can have each tweet stand alone. If you don't do that, like, you have more opportunities to kind of get more eyeballs if you don't, if you have each tweet like live on its own. So that's something that I did, was like, other than just not numbering, I try to make sure that my tweets are very valuable in and of themselves. And then the thread is kind of this tying those all together and telling a story. So life now is basically, I'm working remote for this exchange. I've also started a Patreon in June. There were a lot of, I had a lot to offer via Twitter, but also I felt condensed where I couldn't put like long form videos. And I just thought, YouTube it's just going to take up too much time. So in order for me to bring more value to my community, which they were really loving what I was putting out, I knew I had more to offer. I have a lot of podcasting, editing, and hosting experience. So I was like, look, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to do long form videos. I'm going to give people like behind the scenes access on what I'm doing, but I just can't do all of this like for free. So I made it so that it was sustainable by starting a Patreon. People are really enjoying that so far. And so that's kind of what I've been up to now, is working the job, doing content for them, doing my Patreon, and then Twitter. I've been tweeting a little bit less, but I'm doing still a thread a week, and then with a couple of tweets mixed in. So that's the content creator life as of right now.
Awesome, man. Well, it seems like you're working full-time in the industry at this point, so hopefully that's been a goal of yours. But I figured now that everyone's a little more warmed up with who you are and kind of what you really do, we can really dive down the rabbit hole of Quant overall. And so I think a good place to start off is going back to when you said there was something special about this project. Do you want to just talk about a couple things that really made you feel like it was such a unique project relative to everything else?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, Gilbert Verdian is a huge one, right? So the CEO, he has experience working in cybersecurity for the last 20 years across like a number of crazy companies. His CEV is like Ernst & Young, the Her Majesty's Treasury in England, HSBC, UK Ministry of Justice, PricewaterhouseCooper, UK Department of Health, UK Ministry of Justice, New South Wales in Australia, Department of Finance, Vocalink, which is a MasterCard subsidiary. He's doing all of these things as like high level, chief information security officer, director of security, like all these high level positions at these incredibly well known and established in many times financial or government establishments. And that in and of itself is like, okay, this guy is very impressive. And he got started on this use case early on, where he basically started when he was in the Australian government. He was working in kind of the Department of Health, where they were like, they needed interoperability of these health records. And I actually just posted a video this morning on Patreon doing a deep dive on quant and healthcare, which is like a really underappreciated, in my opinion, kind of aspect of what they do, because a lot of it is focused on the financial sector, and that's definitely more of the short and medium term play. But I think healthcare and health data in general, as far as DLT and tokenization, is going to be a massive play. And Quant is, again, out in front of that. And so that's how Overledger, Quant's product, that was essentially started through Gilbert trying to develop this system for moving health data from system to system via the Australian government. And he developed this kind of overlay system, and the ISO people, the standards organization, came to him and were like, can we make this into an ISO standard? And he was like, yeah. So they started the TC 307, Technical Committee 307, for ISO, which is the International Organization of Standardization, back in 2016. And, he basically has a organization now that has 63 countries are involved. He runs kind of two of the little working groups on interoperability, and then there's a number of others that are much bigger than Quant. Quant hadn't even actually started. I think they started right around the same time that he started the ISO standard. He also started Quant with just a couple of people. And the idea was like, look, we can bring all of these systems together, but we need to do it in a way that's not like some off the radar, like, blockchain that's going to connect to blockchain. It's like, no, the only way this is going to be mass adopted, and ultimately that's really all that matters, right? It's what's going to be used at scale a decade down the road from now, when we have like smart cities and Internet of Things and machines, everything's online and everything's being tokenized. It's like, we need to think ahead. And the only way that can all be, that can all come to fruition is if we have standards, like actual standards that multiple countries, multiple governments, multiple jurisdictions can agree upon and actually execute within those boundaries. And so that's why the ISO standard is so important. And it was, he's starting these ISO standards like on a global level before, or like right at the same time, like Ethereum is being listed at like a cent. You know what I mean? It's like, this is before any altcoins. This is, he's building out distributed ledger technology, global standards, right? So just 5 years ahead of the game. And now we're seeing that his foresight was incredibly accurate, because now we have standards and interoperability are basically the fundamental conversation that's going on within all of the major players, people that move money around the globe at, the trillions and even the quadrillions of settlement dollars a year, things of that nature. These are the people that are, all they're talking about is interoperability and standards, and that is what Quant provides. One of the reasons that I think that it's not as big as it could be in terms of public perception, if it is doing all these things that I claim, like why isn't it blown up already? One, we're early, but two, it's a white label, right? So if you're not familiar with white label products, essentially it's a value proposition that business, B2B companies, business to business companies can offer their clients that says, look, this is our product, this is our service, this is our technology. You can use it for a licensing fee or for some amount of money, and you can use it as your own. You can brand it as if you created it. So if I create like Greg's cool software, and then I go to Tokenicer and I say, hey man, like I made this awesome thing, I think it'll really help your business. He can take my software and call it Tokenicer's new software, even though I made it. Okay, so that's called white labeling your product. So Quant is actually a white label, and their deals that they have with different people and different organizations and different governments, much of it is under non-disclosure agreements, such that, Quant can't go out and say, no, that's ours. Part of the agreement is like, you can have it and you can use it at your discretion. So now, some of those have chosen to become public, like the SIAs, like the Oracles, like the LAC chains of the world. But many of them, 98, 99% of them are private. And a lot of them will remain private. And that's kind of where you get into this conversation when we go into like token value around like speculation and kind of being driven by market psychology, the price, versus utility, and is the token needed at what scale and how much will that drive the price. So with Quant, there's like a very interesting kind of balance between those two. The QNT token, where you're talking about utility driven by the necessity of the QNT token in order for the for Overledger and Overledger network to function properly. It's a payment vehicle where you need to pay licensing fees that get converted into the QNT tokens, so that drives demand. All transactions that are settled across different networks are using the QNT token. Gateway operators, right now they're internal and they're enterprise gateways, but eventually will also be released to the community. Those gateway operators essentially operate as nodes in the system where you stake your QNT. And so there will be demand in that sense, where they will be removed from the market as people stake to earn rewards based on transaction fees through the network. So what we're looking at now is kind of this massive network that's being adopted in a lot of ways that we can see, but even more ways that we can't see. And so that's part of the reason I was drawn to it as well, is like, not only was it checking a lot of boxes from this, investment standpoint, there's a lot of, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around what they're doing, because this whole space is so new. This way of investing is so new. The way to like look at tokens and figure out what is actually has, what actually has some value in this future economy. It's very, very difficult and time consuming. So that's where like all of the opportunity is. And it's great that everyone is in this room and in these types of rooms right now, because we're ahead of the curve. And so part of what was so interesting was like, okay, we don't know necessarily who all their partners are. So based on like little nuggets that Gilbert used to post in the Telegram, he doesn't come in as much anymore because they're way more established and he's way more busy. And frankly, they don't need like community involvement at this like transitional phase that they're going through. So we have a lot of like nuggets from him in AMAs and stuff back in the day. combined with like a community that's always posting, articles and all these things to do with traditional finance and upgrading to central bank digital currencies and, tokenization of assets and NFTs and just the whole space kind of evolving in DeFi and bridges and that interoperability. And the quant community has just like a really sharp eye for different technologies that are going on. Could this be a quant white label? Do you think they're working with them? And tying this all together, and it's like this incredible scavenger hunt where you're just finding new nuggets of information and trying to piece it together and bounce ideas and figure out what's real. And then now over the past year or so, we've also been looking on chain a little bit more to see, hey, look, there's some activity going on with the QNT token that, why are all these wallets being set up with the exact amount of QNT? They're all the same and they all happened in the same, 1 day or 1 week period. And why are they connected to Coinbase custody wallets? And why is there like bot activity? It looks like it's all automated. It's like, could these be licenses? Could these be payment channels? And starting to like really, we're seeing potentially utility at play in real time. Not to the point where I think utility is driving price. There are times when quant will kind of run ahead of the market and then pull back, and you're like, okay, I think like something happened there where they're going and buying massive amounts. There's what's called the quant treasury that kind of goes and supports these license buys and new client activity, and they go to the open market to go get QNT. There's a very low supply of this token, and so when they go and kind of create new licenses and things, it shoots demand up and price rises. But I don't think that's really fundamentally kind of what's moving the price. I think we're still so early in this space, in my opinion, that we're still tied to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin in some respects is still tied to the market at large, and so everything is still pretty much like interwoven at this point. But I think this is one of the tokens that has a real chance to kind of break away. In my opinion, it won't be for a few more years for sure. Everyone is expecting another bull market at the same 4-year interval. I'm not so sure. We'll kind of see how that goes. But, as a conservative estimate, I kind of am looking at, towards the back half of this decade as like a time when, this token has an opportunity to go into the 5 figures. And I don't say that lightly, only because, a lot of people have a lot of bullish estimates for their favorite tokens, but they don't take into account kind of the supply and the actual like adoption and what's driving the real tokenomics. What's interesting about Quant and why I say 5 figures is because it has 2/3 of the amount of supply of Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin can capture $1 trillion of value and move into like, let's call it the $50,000 range, was probably right around when that was. No one ever thought Bitcoin was going to go into the 5 figures except for the hardcore believers, right? And so if Quant can really gain adoption where they're providing interoperability across distributed ledgers and blockchains and legacy systems, even if they only capture 5% of the market, that's going to be multiple trillions of dollars of value flowing throughout the network. And that's kind of the guess or the bet that I'm making. And yeah, that's many multiples in value from here. So again, we're really early, but this is a project that I think fundamentally, from the CEO to the partnerships to how difficult it is to kind of see what's going on. And so the people that have done the most research and pay the closest attention, a lot of like kind of green flags start shooting up. Then the use case, the lack of competition, the approach through standards, and really making sure that this is able to be mass adopted. There's a lot going on here that I'm quite bullish on.
For sure, yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening publicly and behind the scenes. And I think that's a really good point that you say you're keeping it realistic, and that you believe that while we have seen some on-chain actions of potential utility, we shouldn't get too ahead of ourselves, because there is kind of that bias to when you are invested in the project and you have people around you constantly researching it. Your chances are you're going to get a little, I want to say, euphoric and kind of taking everything as a potential hint towards adoption to your specific project. But I just kind of wanted to switch gears a little bit, still talking on research, but something that really impressed me was the thread you had written between the connections on Quant to Meta. And I just kind of want to hear about what led you to find that discovery and kind of how that rabbit hole went about.
Yeah, let me think. I think the thing that triggered it was there was a report that Telefonica had, basically said that they were working with Meta to open up a metaverse innovation hub in Madrid. And that set off kind of all these things in my brain because I had already done some deep dive, a small deep dive, I would say at the time, on Telefonica as a potential quant white label. And then like a week before that, Telefonica had like done some stuff with Oracle, and they were also involved in LackChain. And so I was like, okay, Quant has some ties to Telefonica here. I need to look at that. And also I had like my own personal little thing with Meta ever since I saw Zuckerberg talk in last October at Facebook Connect 2021. He had made a very interesting comment about their approach to interoperability in the metaverse. And he had said that they're working on APIs to support interoperability. And that's not something that people throw around a lot when it comes to like interoperating digital assets and APIs, especially someone of his stature. So I was like, okay. And then he had mentioned interoperability, I think 4 or 5 times in that presentation, in the beginning, at the middle, and at the end. And I was like, okay. And then he went on Gary Vaynerchuk's podcast like a week or 2 after that, and he mentioned interoperability of NFTs in the metaverse 6 times in 5 minutes, or 5 times in 6 minutes, something like that. And I was like, dude, what is this guy's kick with interoperability? Like, you can't, like, I just don't see someone like talking about it that much unless they feel really confident in their solution. And then they started talking more about, he was talking about open standards and just saying stuff that like Gilbert talks about. So anyway, it could be a little rose colored, but I was like, all right, I think, I've always had this little thing about maybe Meta, like, maybe, and then Telefonica, maybe, and then all of a sudden they're working together. And I was like, okay. So I started diving into it, and I found out even further that not only is Telefonica kind of like doing some stuff with Oracle, but literally they moved all of their network infrastructure to the Oracle cloud in Madrid specifically, like a few months back. And so I was like, what the hell is going on? And Quant, if you don't know, they provide interoperability to the Oracle blockchain platform. That is their they chose Quant. They chose Overledger as their interoperability provider for their blockchain platform. So it just, everything just started coming together. And the thread is cool. It's a cool thread. It's definitely one of my top performers. And there's just a lot of ties between Telefonica, Oracle, Meta, and kind of interoperability and where their systems are located. And there's a couple other like little things that I tied in, but that was kind of the general thesis. It all stemmed from Telefonica and Meta announcing this metaverse innovation hub where I think they're hiring like 2,000 people over the next 5 years in Madrid to, build the metaverse. I recently bought a Meta Oculus or Meta Quest 2 to kind of like start playing around in VR and seeing what's up. And like, they're just way ahead. People want to say that, F Zuckerberg and F Meta and F Facebook, like whatever. But the reality is that people choose convenience over privacy. People choose convenience and entertainment over what they think that they value. And this technology is so much better than all of the other and more affordable than all the other VR technology. By the time that becomes a real thing, and we've seen through COVID, like how fast things can change with regards to our behavior based on, the outside environment and restrictions and things. Like anything could happen where, let's say we get locked up again for like a long period of time. Maybe there's a virus that actually is deadly. Maybe you're in countries where there's just a something happens. Who the hell knows, right? And we all got to get on VR to like actually do shit. Like there could be some catalyst. My point is that like pushes us to VR the same way that we got pushed into remote work, maybe a lot faster than we thought we would. It was kind of an overnight thing. Something like that could happen with virtual reality at some point over the course of this decade. And Meta is just way ahead. They're way ahead. And so, I would also suggest watching the Facebook Connect 2021 if you haven't. That was the same conference where he actually announced that they're changing their name to Meta. Very interesting stuff, regardless of your feelings on that company. And it was a good thread. Thanks for asking about it. And it was definitely one of the ones where a light bulb kind of went off for me, and it would be very cool if it was real.
Yeah, for sure. I think, potentially we could see it come into full fruition in the coming years, but just seeing all those connections, even though they're kind of third party and indirect, like, I think there is potentially a lot going on there, and I think it'd be really exciting to see, one day when the metaverse is fully unveiled, to see maybe some on-chain activity that relates to that. But I just kind of want to hear your thoughts on some misconceptions about Quant now, to kind of flip the script. So kind of what you see from potentially newer people coming into Quant that maybe they just kind of get wrong or misunderstand about.
That's a good question. I never really thought about that. Like when you first mentioned it, I kind of thought about like some red flags, but that's not really what you're saying. It's like, I think people don't realize the legacy system part, how important that is.
For sure.
Like that's definitely a misconception, is that like interoperability is just about interoperability between blockchains. It's so much bigger than that and so much more important than that. Because even if we do end up, and we probably will to some respect, end up all on like distributed ledger technologies, which blockchain is a type of DLT, that's not going to happen overnight. And the infrastructure and the technology stacks that are in place today are not going to just switch over. It's going to take years of kind of integrating their systems, and then a slow merge kind of happens. Over time, certain data gets tokenized, certain things move over, certain things don't. And then you blink, and then 15 years from now, everything is automatic and running in a token type format, running across these different automated systems. And that can only be done through true interoperability. But that gray area, that transition period that we are just really entering now, and that's why I say we're early. Like, it's not like we're almost there, in my opinion. I think we're just starting, and that's going to take time, and it's going to require that legacy connectivity to the new technology is in place, so that enterprises and institutions can begin to experiment and begin to create products, and slowly but surely bring in some of their older infrastructure. Like, here's a really probably poor analogy, but I don't know if you guys saw, like, if you use Coinbase, they're switching over now. They used to have like Coinbase, and then they had Coinbase Pro, or back in the day it was GDAX. And now I'm getting like notifications that's like, hey, switch over from Coinbase Pro back onto Coinbase, and we've built basically the advanced marketplace and trading platform back into Coinbase. So they're like, that was happening over a period of time, and now they're like really incentivizing people, like, hey, we're going to move everything over here, come on over. Like, that took years. So that's kind of what's going to happen with this, is that legacy infrastructure is going to take their time to make sure everything is okay and that things are working on that, and then slowly migrate over. So that would be one of the biggest misconceptions, is that interoperability is not just about blockchains. Trying to think if there's another one. New people misconception, that I guess there's some misconceptions about the token, kind of its use case. I think that, and this is kind of been a big point of conversation over the last month or two in particular. But as I understand it, from like the actual part of the technology that allows for the asset transfer, the atomic swap, and these API gateways to move the assets, the only reason that QNT is needed is because QNT is the payment vehicle. It allows the different gateways to speak to each other and to allow access to that trade to happen, that swap to happen. It allows people to get onto the network and open up payment channels so that they can do do these actions. So it's not part of the actual, like the base execution as much as it is required, because that is how they've built it to be required. So it's like think of it as like a signature, right? It's like a payment signature. It's not the contract itself. It's not like the meat of the contract that says like, hey, me and Token are going to do business together, and here's everything that needs to happen for us to like have a business contract. But without the signatures at the bottom, it like can't go through. Does that make sense? So it's like it's required, but it's not the meat of it. So the QNT token isn't like doing the interop, but without it, it can't be signed. So what if one day humans move to like, we don't do signatures, we put on lipstick and we kiss the paper, right? That's the new one. And so signatures are obsolete, and anyone who invested in signatures, they're out of luck, right? I know this analogy is kind of weird, but like that's kind of the idea. It's like, well, could they remove QNT? Yeah, they could, but then they'd have to like re-architect their entire system. They would need to, it would be a big problem, and there would probably be legal issues. There would also be issues with all their partners who have like certified their tech and everything. So that's a misconception, is that like QNT is needed, quote unquote, like for the functionality of the interop. Really, it's like it's a bit like the cousin of that, where it's like it's needed for the payment to allow for the interop to go through on a transaction by transaction basis, and also by different people to access the network, whether that's people creating these multi-ledger applications, which we haven't really talked about, or people that are accessing and using those applications. They all need QNT to touch the network, but it's not actually necessary for the like that base layer kind of interoperability asset like swapping. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. I actually thought that was a pretty nice analogy. It like in terms of it being a signature, and that's not even mentioning the requirement for the other side of token utility in lockups to actually use the network as a license, right?
Yeah. So there's a good graphic on the QNT tokenomics and kind of what it's used for, and there's a good article by CryptoSec SEQ. So I wonder if I can bring that up real quick.
Yeah, I'm just putting the token. I think I know which photo you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the classic one. It's kind of that circle. It's got like 8 or 9 different tokenomics around it. I don't have it in front of me, but yeah. So there's
so I just put it in there right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of the main ones are the licensing to allow people to get on and to access the network, whether that's creating or accessing the applications that are going to be created that, and maybe we should touch on kind of MDApps and multi-ledger applications a little bit, but being able to create those and access those. Then there's the gateways, the payment channels that allow for, the gateway operators. They get paid in QNT for every transaction that runs through their gateway. Essentially how it's structured is every gateway, like you think of it as a node in the network, and each gateway that's run is connected to a certain amount of blockchains or DLTs. So if, right now, like I said, they're only enterprise gateways. It's not available for community to set up their own, but that will come in the next year or two. And you have like my gateway, I can run a Bitcoin node and an Ethereum node and, Cosmos node or something. And then my node on, and that will all connect to my Overledger gateway. And then I connect to the Overledger network, and then any transactions that need or require Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Atom in this case, Cosmos, would look at my gateway as an option in order to potentially make the fastest, cheapest transaction possible for that application. So I'm in the mix, right, for any transaction that needs to actually settle on Bitcoin or on Ethereum or on Cosmos. And I get rewarded in QNT token for every transaction that flows through my gateway. So those are kind of the major use cases. It's the licensing. You're paying Quant Network, the company, to access the network, to get, to be able to log in and use their software. Maybe this is kind of also a good time to again, another, like, I don't know if this is a misconception. I guess it could be, is that like there is this idea that there's going to be like this decentralized network. And the word decentralized, I love talking about it with people because it's just, I think it's overused. I think personally, the only network that we can suggest is decentralized is Bitcoin. I think all the other ones, there's really some central points of failure. Even with Bitcoin, there's like some small ones, but all the other ones have some pretty big ones. In Quant, the big one is that you're running through a company. I mean, let's be honest here. Like, this is pretty centralized. The way I look at it is like, it's a really exclusive high-end bar that like everyone goes to all the time. And you can't, but you're allowed to get in. Almost anyone can get in to this awesome place, but you need to like go through the bouncers and like pay the cover. And then once you're in, you can basically do whatever you want to, a certain extent. And that's just what it is, right? And it's like, to think that we're going to go into a world where everything is like utopian or like free for all, and it's like, the people have taken back like full control of everything, and it's like the nation state is dissolved, and it's like, maybe we can get there, maybe in like 30 years after a world war or two. But the reality is, like, at least for the next decade, like, everything is going to be heavily monitored. It's going to be heavily kind of KYC reliant. Your customer, you're going to need to show identification. And yes, there will be like self-sovereign identity, but that's even like further away, I think, from actually taking shape and, really being implemented at a mass scale. So things need to go through the company. This is a centralized thing. And just because things are permissionless in some respect on the inside, like once you're set up your gateway or you're building your MDApp, they're not like looking over your shoulder like, hey, you need your code, or like you can't do this or you can't. It's like there's an incentive structure in place where bad actors will be removed, but you're pretty much operating under who you are in your like state identification, right? You're not just like some anonymous player like you are with a Bitcoin wallet or an Ethereum wallet. If you want to operate in the Overledger network, you are Greg Lunt. You are like what your name is. And maybe not in every interaction you have, but at least at the front door, like they can trace it back to you. And so that's the reality of this network. And the only way, really, in my opinion, that governments and enterprises and cross-jurisdictional adoption can take place is if there is anti-money laundering, if there is know your customer, if there is this identity reveal as part of the deal. And so, I'm not necessarily like thrilled with that. But if I'm trying to make money, I am looking at what is the realistic scenario is for this technology over the next 5 or 10 years. And in my opinion, what I've just laid out is the realistic scenario, is that everything will go through standardized, transparent processes. And Quant is a major leader there. So you can feel some kind of way about centralization. You can feel some kind of way about government intervention and privacy concerns and all of that. And I probably share the same concerns that you do, if not more. But my investment philosophy needs to remove emotion. And so that's what I've done with this. And I kind of took a long way around the question, which was around, QNT utility. But yes, in order for all of this stuff to function properly, the QNT token is needed as a payment vehicle.
For sure, yeah. And I love how you put that, saying like, you may not agree on kind of the way they're going to go forwards in terms of what might be ideal for you and what might be ideal for the rest of, I guess, retail citizens. But you're putting your emotions aside, which is something we preach a lot here at Terramoon, and saying, okay, well, what's the most realistic scenario? And that would be this technology being integrated and adopted through standardization, and probably government and private sectors adopting this first, rather than kind of that initial thought that people had when crypto started out, that it'd be kind of the people's money, and that presumably abandon the sovereign fiat currencies and switch over to crypto. That's just not as realistic as kind of what's being built at this point in the industry now. But before we finish off and move to our community AMA and the giveaway, I just have 5 quick wrap-up questions for you, real quick.
All right, let's do it.
Awesome. The first one I got is, what would be your favorite activity outside of researching quant?
I've been playing a lot of Valorant recently. It's a first-person shooter on PC, so that's probably that.
Awesome. All right. Who's the most inspirational person in your life?
It's such a good question, because I've had a lot of people inspire me over the years. I think we all experience kind of like you latch onto a person or two, especially in the age of the internet, where like you can get inspired by people that you've never even met before and really become an important part of your life. And that happened to me a few times. But someone that, I never thought I would say this, to be honest, but the person right now who inspires me the most is my brother, who's younger than me and has created a life for himself that I envy in some ways. In some ways I don't, and I don't think envy is necessarily healthy, but I do find myself comparing myself to him, and he inspires me in that the freedom he's built through his business, and yeah, without going into too much detail, just kind of a lot of the perks that he has in his life. So I would say my brother at the moment.
Awesome. All right. Now, what's the biggest mistake in crypto you think you've made?
I didn't sell much quant at the $400 level.
Okay.
Really, I didn't sell any quant at the $400 level. I have taken some quant profits, a small amount. I started investing at about $10, so I did take some, because I think it would be silly not to.
Very true.
But yeah, I played the bull market so fucking well, and then I just thought that when Bitcoin, it was just looking like it was an accumulation zone in that like 50, 60K area. I really thought we were going to go one more push. And I thought, Quant's forming a bull flag here. And then I was like, after this move, I'm going to sell like a huge chunk. And I didn't pull the trigger. So luckily I had made enough good moves where I'm still like up quite a bit on that bull run. But I just think you need to go through a few bull runs. Like the first bull run, you're going to fuck up. Like, you're probably going to ride it up and then ride it down. Your second bull run, you're going to do better. And then the third bull run is probably going to be like the one where you just destroy and like your life's changed forever. That's kind of how I look at it. So I think I did good in this bull run, but I think I could have done way better.
All right. And last one, what do you think so far has been the happiest moment in your life?
Damn. That's crazy, bro. I never thought about that, because I'm not married. I don't have a kid. The happiest moment of my life. Yeah, that's like crazy. I don't know. And I'm a pretty like level dude. Like, I don't get like too hype or too sad. You know what, man? I just can't even answer that question. I don't know the answer to
fair
that,
enough.
because I don't want to just say some shit, because I could just say some shit that made me happy, but like, I really got to think about that. Say what?
What's one moment or one event?
I mean, leaving my job in 2015 and moving out west was like a big deal for me. I just felt like this sense of freedom and being able to kind of start a new life. I guess that was a good one. But there was, some stuff within that was also, it's up and back. I think happiness is a weird one because I think that it's very fleeting. But you did say moment, so yeah. Sorry, that's kind of a shit answer, but yeah, let's just go with that. We'll say that quitting my job and moving out west and kind of starting a new life.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be a pretty big step. All right, so now before we open up the floor for our community AMA, I'm going to be doing a little giveaway of one quant. So this will be a little trivia question, and whoever has the answer to this, just feel free to unmute your mic and spit out the answer. So I'm gonna play it on the screen right now. So as we see here, in what country and industry was Gilbert Verdian working within that gave him
Australia.
Who said that?
Text 1968.
Are you able to remember what industry Gilbert was in during the
Yeah, he's working for the Australian healthcare government.
Okay.
The Australian government and healthcare.
All right, so DM me your ETH address and I'll send you your prize of one quant. That is correct.
Perfect. Thanks.
Of course. All right. So now I'd like to thank everyone for coming on to another episode of Tea Time and, sitting through another fundamental heavy focused discussion. And I'd like to give another special thanks to you, Greg, for taking the time to come on and kind of just explain the ins and outs of Quant and kind of how you personally feel about the project.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate the invite. It's always fun creating with you. So this won't be the last time. And thanks everyone for listening. I know there was a lot of, I went on kind of a few different rants, a little off topic sometimes, but just did some brain dumps and had some new ideas come up due to your questions, Token, and to the audience questions. So I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you.
For sure. All right. Peace, guys. Have a good rest of your week. All right. Well, there you guys have it. It's always a great time chatting it up with Greg and further discussing and expanding on the operations of Quant. And if you guys enjoyed the alpha Greg was dropping, make sure to check out his Twitter and Patreon for even more Quantent revolved around Quant. But anyways, that's about all we've got for today. So I hope everyone got something good out of it, whatever it may be. And until next time, as usual guys, keep grinding and stay safe out there. Peace.